Hey guys, it's Mr. B here. So today I've got a 2011 Honda Ridgeline, and I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to charge an AC system with refrigerant, do a recharge, whatever you want to call it. I do have other videos on this vehicle, so the reason why I had to recharge it is because I did replace the AC compressor and the AC condenser and the service valves. So there's multiple videos on that. But today I'm going to give you a rundown on how to use an AC gauge set. I'm going to show you a few different tips and tricks that I have and different tools that you can use. So the main thing is finding your service valves. So the low side on this vehicle is right there, high side's down there. When you're hooking up these valves, if you turn this valve to the left, it closes it so that no refrigerant will flow through the hose to the system, from the system to the hose. It's got a quick connect, and the high side hose is the same way, right? So it's got a quick connect just like an air hose. So you pull back on that to push it down onto the service valve, and then you simply turn that to open it up and allow refrigerant to go from either, the gauge set through the hose down into the system, or from the system up through the hose to the gauge. So there's also valves on the gauges. Right now I have them turned to the right, which means they're closed. And you can see that there's no pressure, obviously, because there's no refrigerant in the system. If there was refrigerant in the system, then we would see, pressure, right? And we just don't have that because it's empty. It has to be recharged. So, so that's hooked up. That's hooked up. Really the first thing you want to do if you're ready to recharge a system is the best way to do this is to put it under a vacuum, right? So I have a vacuum pump right here. This one I got from Harbor Freight, fairly cheap. It's a vacuum pump designed for just automotive use. By putting this under a vacuum, what it does is it boils off any moisture that's in this system. You got to think, like, if you have this system apart, especially if you have it apart for a couple of days, like if you're waiting on parts or something, or you don't have the time to finish it, where I'm at, there's lots of humidity. So you don't want that moisture getting into the system. And if there is any moisture in there, just naturally, right, you don't want that to stay in there. So that's what the vacuum pump is for. And by using the vacuum pump, it also tells you whether or not you have a large leak. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open these valves. And I've got my yellow line hooked up, obviously, to the vacuum pump. I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on and let it do its thing. So it's gonna start to build negative pressure or vacuum in the system, right? You can see that gauge there starting to move down. And like I said, really what that does is that boils off any moisture in the system, and it prepares the system for a charge. Being that I don't have an AC machine here today, and I'm not using an AC machine right now, to charge this system, I have to allow that AC compressor to kick on, and then I'm gonna open up this low side valve to allow the refrigerant to go through the low side and get sucked in by the compressor. So the compressor will suck in that refrigerant from the low side. It's going to pressurize it and push it through to the high side. Then it goes through the condenser. Then it goes through the high side line. It's condensed down into a liquid, and then it goes from a high pressure liquid inside the cabin to a low pressure vapor, and that's what cools off the air. That cycle is what cools off the air rushing past the evaporator core inside the vehicle to cool off the air in the cabin. So we really want to make sure that we can hold that vacuum as well. That's another thing you want to look out for, is if it doesn't hold the vacuum after you're done with the vacuum pump. But really what you want to make sure of is that everything's working properly when you're done. So once we go ahead and pull that vacuum and let it stay and hold that vacuum for a few minutes, then we're ready to charge it. So when we charge it, the compressor is going to suck in that refrigerant from this low side. I'm going to have the vehicle running and, the compressor on. So sometimes you do have to bypass the relay for the compressor, and you have to actually turn on the compressor yourself just to get things going and get things moving, so that way you can charge that system properly. So that's kind of the rundown on what I'm going to do. I'm going to let it sit on that vacuum pump for about 15 minutes. That's the general rule of thumb. Around 15 minutes is really how long you want it to be under vacuum. And then once it's done, I'm going to go ahead and shut my valves and then just make sure that that vacuum stays in the system. If it leaks out immediately, then that tells me right there that there's a large leak, a line's disconnected, an O-ring's pinched, something's not right. So this not only tells you whether or not there's a large leak, but it also boils off that moisture and helps you prepare the system to take a charge. All right, so it's been well over 15 minutes now, and the system is still holding that vacuum. So that right there tells me there's no large leak. So I'm gonna go ahead and get ready to charge this. Before I do, I want to show you guys a few different tricks. It's kind of the end of the season right now, and my refrigerant tank is out. It's empty. I don't really feel like buying another one right now because it's the end of the season. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use the cans. You can buy the can toppers like this and the little 12-ounce cans at the part stores, and anybody can buy those. If you have the EPA 609 certification, which you can take online, you can buy the 30-pound keg of 134A or 1234YF if you are working on a newer vehicle. So with the 30-pound keg, it is cheaper in the long run if you do enough work on cars. That's why I typically buy the keg, the 30-pound keg. One thing to look out for if you're using this is you want this end up for gas, which when you're charging it in the low side through the blue hose, you're gonna want that to be gas because the compressor sucks in gas. If you're charging it on the high side, like with an AC machine, which I don't have one here, but most shops do, then you're gonna want that tank the other way around if it's pulling it in as a liquid. So if you're using a set of gauges and a scale and a tank, make sure that end is up, just so that way you don't mess up the compressor, especially if it's a brand new one. And then what I would prefer to use is actually a scale. That way, as you charge it with the refrigerant, you can measure how much refrigerant is coming from the keg to the system. With the cans, it's a little bit easier. You don't really need to use a scale because, we know that these are 12-ounce cans, right? I've got 2 of them, so that's about 24 ounces of refrigerant, and we've got a sticker right here under the hood. Most cars do, and it tells us all the information about the air conditioning system, right? We've got the refrigerant type, 134A, which is important. We want to make sure we're using the right refrigerant for this vehicle. Recommended charge maximum is 21.2 ounces. So I'm not going to use the whole can on my second can. And then it does say oil type, PAG oil, which we've been using. And that's really everything we need to know. So if I was using my tank, I would be able to measure it with that scale. And you can pick up these scales for pretty cheap on Amazon or Harbor Freight if you don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on them. Same way with the vacuum pump and the gauge set. You can find them fairly cheap, at places other than, the tool trucks. So this is how I'm going to do it today with the little cans because, like I said, my big tank is empty and don't really feel like spending the money on a big tank right now. I'll show you a few tricks on how to use that can with a gauge set. And then the other thing too is you can buy the cans at the store that have the little hose on the end of them that you just plug right into the low side. if you're, you know, a DIYer and you don't really want to spend a bunch of money on, you know, the gauges and the vacuum pump and the scale and all that, you can go ahead and use those. I mean, they definitely work. But really, if you're going to do more than just one job, right? If you work on multiple AC systems, these tools that I'm showing you guys how to use, they do pay for themselves. I mean, mine are definitely paid for, and they have been for a while. So, you know, there's definitely cost savings in the long run, because those fancy cans with the hoses, they are way more expensive than the little cans, or in the long run, buying it in bulk with a tank. So anyways, moving on. So for the can topper, what you want to do is you want to turn that valve so that it opens up. I heard that refrigerant go into the hose. The hose even moved a little bit. So I do have some refrigerant up to my gauges right now. And right now, these valves are closed, so nothing's going past those gauges. So I've got refrigerant coming from here to here. Nothing is going past those gauges into my system yet. If you're going to do this with a gauge set, do not open that high side valve, because you want to charge the system on the low side, not the high side, because we want that refrigerant to get sucked in as a vapor. So, like I said before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the vehicle. I'm going to go do that right now. I'm going to make sure the air conditioning is turned on, and we'll open up that low side valve, get the refrigerant to go in, see if that compressor kicks on. So the engine does have to be running, so that way the AC compressor actually works. And then we've got the AC on. It's on set to low, just like before. And the other thing I like to do too is use a thermometer in the vents, and I'll go grab one here in a minute, to measure the temperature drop coming out of those vents. But for now, what we'll do is, I know that it's going to take that whole can, so I'm going to go ahead and open up my low side and let that start to suck in refrigerant. Okay, so unfortunately the compressor's not kicked on yet. But what I'm going to do, and this does help if you're using the cans, is sometimes you got to tip them upside down and shake them. So you can see now as I'm shaking it, right, my low side pressure's going up, and there we go, the compressor just kicked on. You can see it down in there. You can see that the clutch is spinning with the pulley. So right now my AC compressor is spinning, the pulley's spinning, and it is sucking refrigerant from the can through the gauge set, through that low side, down into the system. And I'm going to go ahead and shake this can around until I can feel that it's empty. And you can even see on the sight glass that there's refrigerant flowing into the system, right? So there it is right there, it's going in. I'm just gonna keep doing this until there's no more refrigerant coming in through my sight glass. So once I get that all situated, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and use part of my other can. And once I am done using that other can, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what I mean by the thermometer in the vents and the temperature drop that we're looking for. One thing you really want to make sure of before you change out the can is you want to make sure that that valve is closed, so that way the refrigerant from the system doesn't come spewing out the other end. So both those valves are closed. It's really pretty simple. Get these can toppers on. You just untwist the hose from the can, right, like that. And then there you go. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'll thread this on, turn that valve, get that can going. And like I said, on this particular vehicle, I don't want to use the whole can, because I don't want to overcharge it. If I overcharge it, then it's possible that the evaporator on the inside will start to freeze because it's getting too cold. And we don't want that. So I'm gonna put a little bit of this can in and then go and check my thermometer. All right, so now I got the other can hooked up. Go ahead and open my low side valve to let that refrigerant go through it. And same thing, I'm just gonna shake it until we get some refrigerant going in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some more of this can in. Stop it about halfway through. I'm just gonna feel the can to see how much is in it. And then we'll go ahead and check our temperature coming out of our vents. All right, so I'm done charging the vehicle. I've got most of that second can in. I can still feel a little refrigerant. So now is the time when I want to check the temperature coming out the vents. So I've got the I've got the air conditioning turned down to where the fan's on low. Of course, AC's on, temperature's all the way down to low. The lower the fan speed, the lower the temperature coming out of these vents will be. Because the more air you rush past the evaporator core behind the dash, the harder it is for it to keep up. So the lower the fan speed, the cooler the air. Kind of seems backwards. You would think the faster the fan blows, the colder the air is. But as far as the temperature drop goes, the lower the fan setting, the lower the temperature. So like I said before, we were right around 80 degrees. And right now we're down to 50 coming out the vents. That is perfect. That's exactly what we want. It's exactly where we need it to be. Anywhere from a 20 to 30 degree drop, is really what we're looking for coming out these vents. 30 is right on the money. That's exactly what we want. So, another thing I really want to show you guys is the gauges, right? And one other trick. So on the gauge set, our low side is around 25 and our high side is just above 150. That is normal, okay? The low side could be anywhere from 10 to 50 for the pressure, anywhere from 10 to 50. The high side could be anywhere from 100 to 250 on the higher range, maybe 300. The reason why I like to use the gauge set is it gives me a picture of how this system's working, right? If my high side gauge is pegged all the way over and the pressure is way too high, you've got a bad expansion valve or an orifice tube, whichever one the car has. So this is a diagnostic tool as well. I've used it to check to see if there's any pressure in the system, for one, to see if there's any refrigerant. And you can check to see if the expansion valve is bad just by looking at that gauge. And then once you recharge the system, you can see how it's working. So our pressures are normal. They're right where they need to be. So that tells me that our job here is almost done. Really, the only thing I have left to do is to take the hoses back off and put those service caps back on. That's really about it. If you're a DIYer and you're buying those recharge cans and you don't have the gauge set, one thing you can do is that thermometer trick. But the other thing you can do too, just to do a quick check to see if the air conditioning is working, is just take your hand and be careful of the belt. Feel the line, the low side line, right? So this line here is my low side. And if the air conditioning is working right, it should be cold. You might even see some condensation, some water dripping off of it, which we do right here. Okay, I got some nice condensation on that line. Okay, that line to the touch is nice and cold. And then our high side line, which is this littler line way in the back, our service valves right there for the high side, that should be warm. Okay, when I'm feeling that should be warm to the touch, maybe even hot. Okay, and it is. So, that tells me right there that this system's working properly. If my high side line is hot and my low side line is cold, it's doing something, right? There's some refrigerant in there, the compressor's working. You know, whether or not you have enough, well, it's kind of hard to fully tell without using that AC machine to evacuate and recharge the system. But there are ways to do it without the machine, like this, with the recharge cans, you know, with the keg and the scale, if that's all you have. And it's always worked good for me. So we've got that 30-degree drop. That's all we need. Our pressures are good. All right, so one more thing I want to show you guys is I want to show you how to use an oil injector. If you have an AC machine, it will do this for you. But if you're using the gauge set like I am, it doesn't inject the oil for you. So when I replaced the compressor, I filled the compressor full of oil. And I left a couple ounces under, so that way I could inject some oil with this tool to show you guys how to use it. So, and the compressor was full anyway. So, anytime you recharge an AC system, you should add at least an ounce, preferably 2 ounces of refrigerant oil. Okay, so I've got R134A PAG 46 refrigerant oil with the UV dye. So what the UV dye does is it floats around in the system with the oil, and if there's ever a leak, I shouldn't say if, when there's a leak, it will come out of there and leave a trail, right? Some breadcrumbs for you to be able to find, okay, where is this leak coming from, right? Is it coming from the, AC compressor seal on the front? Is it coming from a line? Is it coming from, a broken O-ring, the AC condenser? Whatever it might be, that dye will come out with it, and you can take a black light, a UV light, and then shine it over all the lines, all the hoses, and the AC compressor, and see if that dye comes out anywhere so that you know, okay, my refrigerant's leaking out here, right? So to use the tool, you just loosen this cap here, and you can find these pretty cheap on, Amazon. I think they sell products that are perfectly fine. So I'm going to loosen that cap up, put some oil in there, and then go ahead and show you guys how to use it. Okay, so on the inside of there is where I put the oil. I've got this turned out to 1 3/4 ounces. I found on this tool, if you turn it all the way out to 2 ounces, it actually runs out of threads. So I'm just going to put in 1 3/4, and that will be more than enough for what we need. So what the oil does is it lubricates the compressor, right? The AC compressor, just like this one. This is the old one. It lubricates the compressor, and the compressor, it's got moving parts inside of it. So if you don't put any oil in the system, especially if you're replacing the compressor, that compressor is going to go bad very quickly. So we don't want that. So, okay, I'm going to thread that back on. Even if you're doing a normal recharge where, you're going to recharge the system to see where the leak's coming from type of thing, or you just want to recharge it to get the air conditioning to work for the next couple of months until the season's over, you still want to put oil in the system, because whenever the refrigerant leaks out, a lot of that oil does come with it. You just might not be able to see it. So if you're going to do a recharge, the best way to do it is to add around 2 ounces of oil to the system. So that way, that, hey, there is enough oil in there and my compressor's not going to go bad. Because sometimes you just got a hose that's leaking a little bit and you don't really notice it right away. It might take a month or two. Maybe you've got a service valve, right, that's leaking a little bit and you don't notice it right away. And a lot of people, all they do for that is they recharge the system and they wait 3 months. And if the AC works for the next 3 months, then great. That might get you through the summer, and then next spring you just recharge it instead of spending a bunch of money on some new parts. So anyways, long story short, if you're going to recharge the system, the best way to do it is to also add oil. So right now I've of course got the vehicle on, engine running, air conditioning still on, the compressor's going. So I'm gonna hook up this valve here to the low side, and then I'll start turning this piece in to inject the oil into the system. So I'm gonna turn that valve so that it opens up. I got it all hooked up. And then literally all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this to the right, and then as I turn it, it forces the oil to go into the line, and you know, then we've got oil in the system. All right, there you go. So it's turned in all the way. That means all the oil that I had in this oil injector is in the system. Like I said, it's got that dye. So if I ever have a leak anywhere on a hose, a line, a fitting, the compressor, the condenser, if there's a leak anywhere in this system, that dye will go with it, and we can use a black light, a flashlight to shine on it and pinpoint where the leak's coming from. Super helpful tool. And if you don't put oil in the system when you recharge it, you're running the risk of eventually ruining the compressor because there's no oil in it to lubricate it. And you can even see there how green that dye is even without the black light. So that is really what we want in there, so that if it does leak out, we can find the leak. So yeah, that's that. If you guys found this to be helpful, please like and subscribe. And there's also other videos on how to replace that AC compressor and condenser on the channel. Thanks.